Have you ever just stopped and wondered, what makes me, well, me? It's a huge question, right? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the incredible biological machinery that's running the show, the stuff that shapes our thoughts, our feelings, pretty much everything we do. This is all about the biology of our behavior.
And it all starts with that classic question, nature versus nurture. Are you hardwired from day one, or are you a product of everything you've ever experienced? Well, as we're about to see, the real answer is a little bit of both, and it's absolutely fascinating.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start small, really small, with your genetic blueprint. Then we'll zoom out to the body's massive electrical network. From there, we'll get to the main event, the brain itself, how it evolved, and, get this, how it can actually change. And we'll wrap up by looking at how we're literally starting to hack the system. Let's dive in.
All right, first stop. We have to begin at the very foundation with the instructions that build you from the ground up, your genes. This is where the first draft of your behavioral story is written.
The science that tackles this is called behavioral genetics. And the most important word here is interact. It's not this big showdown, genes versus environment. It's much more like a dance, a really complex dance between the two. So how in the world do scientists figure out who's leading?
Well, one of the best ways is by studying twins. Think about it. Identical twins are basically genetic clones. Fraternal twins? They're more like any other siblings, sharing about half their genes. So by comparing these two groups, scientists can start to untangle what comes from our DNA and what comes from, our life experiences.
So, what have we learned from all this? First off, you can forget about finding a single anxiety gene or smart gene. It doesn't work that way. Most traits are polygenic, which just means tons of genes all chip in a tiny little bit. Second, genes aren't destiny. They don't make you do anything. They just nudge you in a certain direction. And third, and this is the really cool part, your environment can actually talk to your genes. It's a field called epigenetics, where things like your diet or stress can flip genetic switches on or off, changing how your body reads its own instruction manual.
Okay, so we've got the blueprint. Now let's talk about the wiring. If your genes are the plans, then your nervous system is the high-speed, super complex electrical grid that actually brings you to life.
And this whole thing is organized like a giant company. You've got the C-suite. That's your central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, making all the big decisions. Then you've got the peripheral nervous system, which is like the network of employees and messengers running everywhere else, handling everything from you deciding to get up and grab a snack to the stuff you never think about, like your breathing or your heartbeat.
And who's the star player in this entire operation? It's the neuron. You can think of it as a living, breathing wire that sends messages. And you have billions, something like 100 billion of them, all firing away inside you right now. Each neuron is pretty simple, really. You've got the dendrites, which act like little antennas listening for signals. The cell body, or soma, processes that info. And if the signal's important enough, a message zips down the axon, the long transmission cable, to talk to the next cell in the line. But wait, neurons are the stars, but they aren't solo acts. They have this huge support team called glial cells. For the longest time, scientists thought they were just kind of packing material. But nope, they're the roadies, the security, the caterers, they do everything. They feed the neurons, clean up their messes, and they actually outnumber them by a lot. They are absolutely critical.
So how do all these cells chat with each other? Well, they don't actually touch. There's a tiny gap. To cross it, they send little chemical messages called neurotransmitters. You've probably heard of some of them, like dopamine and serotonin. Keeping these guys in balance is key. If the levels are off, it can affect your mood, how you move, how you think, everything.
And the whole process is unbelievably fast. A neuron receives a chemical signal. If that signal is strong enough, it fires an electrical pulse, bam, down its axon. That pulse makes it release its own chemical messengers, which float across the gap and tell the next neuron to do the exact same thing. It's this incredible chain reaction happening millions of times a second. Okay, we've seen the wires and the signals. Let's zoom into the command center itself, the brain. This thing is a masterpiece, and it wasn't built in a day. It's the result of millions upon millions of years of evolution. I mean, just look at this timeline. The first little hint of a central nervous system showed up over 500 million years ago. But for us, the story really kicks into high gear with the first primates and then our own human ancestors. It's just amazing to think about the deep, deep history sitting right there inside your head.
And you can literally see that history in fossils. Look at how the skull, the brain's protective case, changed over time. See how that forehead goes from sloped and low to high and round? That's all new real estate opening up, making room for the parts of our brain that handle complex thought and planning.
But check this out. Here's a fun little curveball. Our ancient cousins, the Neanderthals, their brains were actually a little bit bigger than ours on average. So what does that tell us? It tells us that bigger isn't always better. The secret sauce is probably in how the brain is wired up, its organization and efficiency, not just its raw size.
This leads us to what might be the single most mind-blowing concept in all of neuroscience. Your brain isn't set in stone. It's not a static computer. It is constantly, actively changing and rewiring itself based on your life.
Need proof? Look no further than London taxi drivers. To get their license, they have to memorize a truly insane map of 25,000 streets. They call it the knowledge. And when scientists scanned their brains, they found that the part responsible for spatial memory, the hippocampus, was physically bigger than in other people. Their brain literally grew to handle the job.
This amazing ability is called brain plasticity. It means every time you learn something new, practice a skill, or even just think a new thought, you are physically changing the structure of your brain. Your experiences are not just memories. They become a part of your biology.
You know, for the longest time, the official story in science was that you were born with all the brain cells you were ever going to get. End of story. Well, guess what? That is completely wrong. We now know for a fact that adult brains can and do grow new neurons. The process is called neurogenesis, and it's a total game changer, showing us that our brains have this capacity for renewal we never dreamed of.
So, if our brain is this incredibly dynamic, adaptable, rewiring machine, what happens when we start to plug into it directly? This is where things get really futuristic. This is where mind meets machine.
And I'm not talking about science fiction. This is happening today. Using technology that reads brain waves called EEG, scientists have let people move a cursor on a screen, type messages, and even fly a drone, all just by thinking. The hope here is incredible, especially for restoring communication and movement for people with paralysis.
Which brings us to one last epic question to chew on. We've gone from the genetic code, to a nervous system, to a brain that can rewire itself, and now, a brain that can reach outside the body to control machines. So, if we can do all that, what are the actual limits? Where does our biology end and our potential begin?